Part 22. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 211. Ah! The screams rang out, and the cultivators who grabbed the two women were also stunned on the spot. There was no movement just now. Why did someone suddenly approach and hurt one of them? Who dares to hurt our people from the Julie sect? One of them rushed forward and quickly grabbed into the darkness. Julie sect, as the name suggests, the cultivators in the sect have infinite strength after cultivation. At the same time, another person also bullied himself. The person who came was Zuyun. He just heard the movement here, and then sneaked over quickly. Chang Shengju did not use chaotic spiritual power, and with the cover of darkness and the woods, they were not here, so they naturally could not find it. Dog Nose smelled Zuyun's scent, so he shouted at them to stop. It was because of his shouting that he just won this breath of time. Julie sect. Behind a tree, Zuyun's disdainful voice came, and then a cold voice sounded. Golden Sun Curse. Instantly, the light was shining. Whether it was the three foundation building monks or Urgu and the others, they were all shrouded in light. 9 round suns overhead, emitting dazzling golden light, attacked the three people respectively. Be careful! Including the monk with a broken hand, the faces of the three people changed drastically. Each round of sun carries the power of the foundation building period. They dare not underestimate it, and they all offer their own life magic weapons to resist. But Zuyun is more than just this method. He used his mind to do two things at the same time, holding the sword and thrusting it forward at the monk with a broken arm. Sword chi is released. As the voice fell, under the golden light of the round sun, another waist-thick golden sword chi suddenly attacked. The monk with a broken arm had no way to avoid it. He was either hit on the head by the round sun or cut off by the sword chi. Damn it! He screamed in fear, at a loss, while the 3 round suns instantly engulfed him, and he was annihilated into blood foam by the sword chi. Big brother! The other two were terrified. They never thought that Zuyun, who was only in the early stage of foundation building, could kill one person with just 2 moves. Let's join forces and attack. The Julie sect is also one of the powerful sects in the 36 caves in the sea. They often go to the sea to fight monsters, and the tacit understanding is self-evident. Just by exchanging eyes, they knew each other's thoughts. As soon as the voice fell, the two ignored the round sun above their heads, withdrew to the left and right, and quickly attacked Zuyun. That's it? Zuyun sneered, opened his left hand, and gently uttered 2 words. Leave the fire. As soon as the flame started, Zuyun threw it out. The fire column was like a fire dragon, flying and winding flexibly. In the blink of an eye, he was trapped in the place and burned continuously with the flames. This is the fire spell driven by pure fire spirit power. How can he, an ordinary foundation building period, compare? While using the fire curse, Zuyun did not put down his right hand. He held the sword and directly met the giant palm transformed by the monk's spiritual power. Boy, this is the wonderful skill of my Julie sect, the Julie palm. Break all the magic weapons for me. Seeing his fellow disciples trapped by the fire dragon, the monk immediately used his strongest move, regardless of anything, and condensed all his spiritual power. Not to mention killing Zuyun with one move. Even if he broke this middle-grade spiritual sword with force, he could seriously injure him. Little did he know that all this was his wishful thinking, thinking that this was Zuyun's life magic weapon. But even if it was, how could he succeed? This sword was a middle-grade spiritual sword tempered by the burning sky flame. Bang! As he spoke, the giant palm hit the tip of the sword, and a huge force came, and Zuyun couldn't help but tremble in his hand. Although he was surprised, he still thrust the sword forward again. The extremely sharp sword tip broke the surface with a point. After the spiritual power exploded and cancelled each other out, the monk's flesh palm was exposed under the giant palm. My hand. A sword pierced through the palm, and a scream arose. Ha! Zuyun smiled contemptuously and rushed forward again. He didn't need any sword moves. He only relied on the sharpness of the spiritual sword and the longevity technique that he had already mastered. In an instant, the monk was covered with scars. Ah! Even though the technique he practiced was close to the art of body refining, how could he withstand the sword? Especially when Zuyun chopped down with the sword, he activated the golden spiritual power. Gold is from the prophet. After a moment, he was dead. Zuyun looked back and saw that the monk on the left was also tightly entangled by the fire dragon. His clothes had turned black, and some black pieces would fall off when the monk moved. The fire dragon was getting tighter and tighter, and finally he had no place to move to deal with it, and was entangled by the fire column. Another scream echoed through the night and spread to the sea city. Are you all okay? All three died, and Zuyun was also exhausted. He panted slightly and asked. It's okay. Meng Hui's eyes flashed with a strange color, and he said lightly. Ergu and Gaobazai also shook their heads repeatedly, indicating that they were okay. They even took the storage bags of the two people who kept their bodies intact and put them in their pockets. They have seen the world and fights. Only Zhou was still in shock. It's good that you are okay, Zuyun nodded lightly, and with a flick of his right hand, he sacrificed the flying boat. Come on up. This is. Everyone's eyes lit up, especially Meng Hui. This is the flying boat of Wanjian Mountain. She naturally recognized it. But it's not advisable to stay here for a long time. If you have anything to say, it's not too late to say it later. After everyone got on the flying boat, Zuyun did not shy away and took the spirit horse into the pasture inside the day-glazed mirror. After hesitating for a moment, he also put away the mortal horse. As long as there is no intention of resistance, Zuyun can put away the beasts anytime and anywhere. Lingma is close to Zuyun. Although Fanma doesn't know Zuyun, Fanma has no obvious intelligence. Since he can be ridden by others, he has naturally been tamed. Therefore, Zuyun easily took it away. Everyone was surprised. They all saw with their own eyes that the monk who accepted Zhao Kamang was like this, and they thought Zuyun was also capable of this. Let's go, let's take you to Lingjian sect first. I wish I could get a flying boat on the clouds and fly away quickly. After about half an hour, several late-stage foundation building monks arrived. When a shirtless man saw this, his eyes turned red and he said angrily, "Who dares to kill my Julie sect disciple? I don't know what the person who did this meant. Since he killed the patrolling people, why didn't he sneak into our sea city?" Another person stood up and said. The others nodded secretly, feeling a little strange. Follow the rules of Hiu City. Disciples on patrol are not allowed to leave their posts without permission. Then naturally there will be no trouble. But in a group of 3, only 2 corpses were seen. The other person must have died more tragically, with no bones left. Leader. Our Julie sect has always done our best for Hiu City. If this matter is not investigated clearly, I, the sect leader, may not be able to convince the public. I will not be able to send disciples to patrol Hiu City in the future. The big man's bloodshot eyes looked at a man in white. He is none other than Alliance leader Hai Moyan. Strength reaches its peak in the later stage of foundation building. Ya Liao. Let's let this matter go. Since these 3 people are from your Julie sect, how can they not be from my Hiu City? The murderer did not enter Hiu City. At the same time, the rest of the patrolling monks were not attacked. From what I can see, this matter is probably directed at your Julie sect. As Hai Moyan spoke, he glanced at everyone present. Why did the leader say this? Since our Julie sect came ashore, we have always kept our peace and have never offended the other fellow Taoists in Dongtian. Ya Liao said loudly. Indeed, We have always been on good terms with our fellow Taoists, and our disciples also get along peacefully without any conflicts. That's right, fellow Taoists from the Zhuli sect are outspoken by nature. They say everything openly, and we all understand that. The leader of the alliance speaks frankly. Under such conditions, no one wants to hear you talk about it. Hai Moyan looked away and said, there are 36 caves in the sea area, and only 35 caves are left to develop the sea area city. In the middle of the sentence, Ye Liao's eyes widened and he interrupted without politeness and said angrily, are you talking about those girls from Haili sect? Hai Moyan looked solemn and said, this is just suspicion. Everyone knows that before we came ashore, your Zhuli sect was the big patron of Haili sect. But you usually act recklessly, and the same is true when you are practicing dual cultivation. Haili sect is with you. Are there many disciples of the Zhuli sect who are either dead or injured? It's true. My disciples often come back from Haili Island, saying that they just happened to meet someone. If they go back a few days ago, they can't see anyone. Don't talk about disciples. I have had several lovers. I heard that a few of them died at the hands of wild Taoist friends. Don't talk about this matter anymore. Even if there is an accident, the wild Taoist friend must have explained it to Lord Shiva. Listening to these discussions, Ye Liao said angrily, if one is injured, I will pay 800, if one dies, I will pay 1000. Our Zhuli sect has never owed her Shiva. If it was really her Haili sect who did it, I have to sleep to death for 30 Ye Liao. Hai Moyan was silent for a moment, sighed, and said, Ye Liao, Haili sect is 40 miles away to the north of Lingjian section. If you wanted revenge before, I would not stop you. But at this time, the formation in the sea, it's imminent. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 212. Everyone fell silent when they heard Hai Moyan talking about the formation. Indeed, the recent news is that the energy of the formation is gradually weakening. No one knows how weak it can be. At present, all the people of the sea monster sect are lurking at the edge of the barrier of the formation and reporting the situation every day. As long as the energy starts to rebound, they will rush over immediately. Ye Liao gritted his teeth and said, this Haili sect really knows how to choose the time. I will settle accounts with them when I return from the formation. Compared with avenging the 3 disciples in the foundation building period, Ye Liao still maintained his rationality. It's just that he can't guarantee that he will lose some strength on his side. If he can find the treasure at that time, he will get less. After all, they had already discussed and divided the things according to the number and realm of the people who can survive in the end. The 3 foundation building periods have a great impact on the giant force sect. If he goes to take revenge again and happens to catch up with the bombardment of the formation, the loss will be great. It's great that you think so. Hai Moyan patted Ye Liao's shoulder and said, everything should be based on the overall situation. The skills you practiced in the Zhuli sect will definitely be used vigorously at that time. Ye Liao stopped talking and just nodded. Hai Moyan then said to everyone, at present, it is just a guess that it was done by the Haili sect, and there is no evidence to prove it. So next, let all the patrolling troops shrink back to the 10-mile range of the sea city. In this way, if there is a fight, we can also find it in time and rush to help. Everyone nodded. They all knew Hai Moyan's worries. If it was just Haili sect venting their personal grudges, it would be fine, but if it was other forces, it would be hard to say. Because this means that the secret of the formation has been leaked. They will also have one more opponent. Zuyun didn't know what happened here. Controlling the flying boat, he finally returned to the Lingjian sect. Iargo vaguely guessed something. He secretly glanced at Zhou but didn't say anything. Sure enough, after landing, Zhou felt a hint of killing intent. And there was a bit of blood. What happened? She asked with a trembling voice. although Zuyun redeemed her in front of her. But after all, Zhou practiced here, from a little girl to a big girl. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a second home. But at that time, Zuyun overturned her understanding of Lingjian sect. Nothing, it's just that Lingjian sect will be completely renewed in the future. Zuyun smiled slightly. Zhou raised her head in a daze and asked Zuyun, "Little brother Zhu, are my master and others dead?" Zuyun nodded, and then walked away, saying, "Lingjian sect was originally a sect controlled by Wanjian Mountain in Yezhu. Since you have been practicing in the sect for so many years, you must know that there is an elder from Wanjian Mountain stationed here for a long time." Zhou nodded. "You saw the situation at that time. When I exchanged you with spirit stones, what did they do? Because the purpose of their training disciples is to exchange for more training resources. If there is no talent, they will let it die. Ergu knows a lot about this." Zhou looked at Ergu, and Ergu nodded, proving that Zuyun's words were correct. After hearing these words again, Zhou has calmed down a lot. "So, brother Zhu, what do you mean by the Lingjian sect being completely renewed? A capable person has been replaced as the sect leader. At the Jindan stage, I believe his vision will certainly be extraordinary. Just practice hard and you'll be fine." Talking and walking, the group came to the Magian cliff. When on the flying boat, Zuyun could feel that Sun Qiniang was standing at the stone tablet of Magian cliff. Except Yu Yulin, all the disciples gathered here. Zuyun. Seeing Zuyun coming back, Sun Qiniang was delighted. "Well, I'll send someone back for you." Zuyun smiled and stepped aside. Suddenly, Meng Wei and Sun Qiniang's faces changed at the same time. "Jian Tianming." Meng Wei. However, there was no tense aura coming from them. Sun Qiniang laughed first and said, "Meng Wei, I am Sun Qiniang, not Jian Tianming." Meng Wei frowned and asked, "How do you prove it? What if you lied to Zuyun? You were once in the Jindan stage, don't forget, I was also in the Jindan stage." Everyone trembled when they heard the three words Jiandan stage. The disciples of the Lingjian sect couldn't believe that their new sect leader was in the Jindan stage. And the mortal with no spiritual power besides Zuyun was also? Why is that? You can ask Zuyun. Anyway, if I were Jian Tianming, he would have died long ago, so why wait until now? After that, Sun Qiniang no longer restrained herself and released her aura in the early stage of Jindan. Feeling this unmatched pressure, Meng Wei breathed a sigh of relief. If she was really Jian Tianming, at this level, they would have died before they could even say a word. Meng Wei knew Jian Tianming very well, who was extremely arrogant and regarded human life as worthless. "Since you are Sun Qiniang, we have no grudges. I wonder if Sect Master Sun welcomes us to stay here." Meng Wei vaguely knew the purpose of Zuyun bringing them to the Lingjian sect, and they were afraid that they would have to stay for a while. "Of course." Sun Qiniang swept her eyes over and said, "Zuyun is the honorary elder of Lingjian section. There is nothing wrong with bringing someone here as a guest." Zuyun smiled helplessly, then stepped aside, exposing Zhouruyu's figure to everyone. "Sect Master Sun," Zuyun said with a playful smile, "she is also a disciple of the Lingjian sect, so let's leave her to your arrangements." Ergu also said hurriedly, "Sun Qiniang, this is my biological sister, you can teach me so well." Hearing such familiar words and calling herself Sun Qiniang's beautiful eyes widened incomparably. After a while, she realized what she was doing and said in surprise, "Are you, senior brother Zhou?" Ergu nodded helplessly. Sun Qiniang was extremely shocked, but it was difficult to ask questions in front of many disciples, so she agreed. "Easy to say." Zuyun then said, "Okay, then I won't disturb you anymore. I will take them to the valley." Just as he finished speaking, Ergu said, "Xiaozu, I'll stay here and talk to Sangu about something." I won't go to the valley for now. In Lingjian sect, I still like to live in the cave under Magian cliff. Zuyun didn't force anything, and simply led Meng Wei towards the valley. It wasn't until the two figures disappeared that Guza scratched his head and said to Ergu, "Second brother, what do you want to tell me?" The dog's nose was called the third dog, and it was natural to call the second dog the second brother. At the same time, he also wanted to see the real big brother and what the big dog looked like. Ergu glanced at him sideways and said, "Your nose is very good, but your brain is useless." Ah! The dog's nose was puzzled and his face looked strange. "Oh, that's right." Ergu patted his forehead and said, "You are a dog, of course you don't understand other people's love and affection." The dog's nose now reacted. Ergu was scolding him. He immediately said angrily, yes, I am a dog, but you are really not a humming human." "Good guy." Ergu picked him up by the collar and said coldly, "Second level chi refining, how dare you be so presumptuous in front of me, ninth level chi refining." With that said, he turned to Sun Qiniang and said, "Junior sister Sun, I will go to the cave below and won't disturb you." Sun Qiniang gave a sweet smile and deliberately teased, "Senior sister Jo, you can do it yourself, but don't go to the bottom of the valley. It's dangerous there." Ergu nodded, but he didn't agree in his heart. He didn't know that Master Zhu Yang was trapped below, and thought that after Meng Wei came out, the convenience would be empty. Taking the dog's nose all the way down the mountain road, the two entered the cave. Elder Wan lived here before, but although it was later messed up by Yu Yulin, neither of them was very particular about it, so they just stayed here. At the same time, Zuyun took Meng Wei into the valley. Meng Wei kept looking at it and murmured, "After so many years, things are really different and people are different." Zuyun smiled and said, "Don't sigh, it's rare to have some free time. Let's see if there is any possibility for you to practice again." Meng Wei turned around, with a pair of beautiful eyes shining brightly, and asked Zuyun, "Why do you want to practice again?" Upon hearing this, Zuyun's tone suddenly stopped and he asked strangely, "Don't you want to practice?" Meng Wei sat on a round stone, holding his chin with his hands, and said calmly, "My lifespan is less than 50 years. Even if I practice again to the chi refining stage, my lifespan will not increase any more. Rather than wasting that time on cultivation, it's better to enjoy the rest of your life. It's all about death anyway, so why not be happy and carefree?" Zuyun was speechless and said, "Xiao Yuan Dan, is it useless?" Meng Wei raised his head, looked directly at Zuyun and said, "I don't know if it is useful or not, but even if it is useful, you have to wait until after the chi refining period before taking it. Unless, you can find the Xiao Yuan Dan refined from other immortal elixirs, otherwise use it won't help, and it will make my body overwhelmed." Zuyun said anxiously, "Then I'll go find him." From the bottom of his heart, he did not want Meng Wei to die as a mortal. "Stop looking for it," Meng Wei smiled instead, and then said seriously, "Now, I think this place is quite good. Zuyun, you are destined to be immortal, but you are always hindered by human affairs. It's time for you to practice hard. Leave me alone." Zuyun heard the meaning, Meng Wei just wanted to wait to die. "No, Meng Wei." Zuyun shook his head repeatedly, and then said, "I am about to go to the sea array to hunt for treasure. It is said that the array has been there for many years, and there may be a magic elixir of longevity in it. If I can get one, I will refine longevity essence for you. Dan. How about you practice again when the time comes?" Seeing Zuyun being so solemn, Meng Wei sighed in his heart and had no choice but to nod in agreement. Zuyun couldn't help but cheered, and then said, "In that case, that's the best. It's getting late, you can find a room to rest, and I'll make a magic weapon." After that, he walked towards the weapon refining room. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 213. Ever since he obtained the vital pseudo-wood spirit bead, Zuyun had been thinking about making a magic weapon for Menghui whenever he could. Although she now coexists with the spiritual fire and there is no need to worry about her survival, Zuyun has not let go of the things she had decided before. After arriving at the weapon refining room, Zuyun skillfully took out the weapons refining tools from the storage bags. When I left here before, except for the stove which was inconvenient to take away, everything else was taken away. Nowadays, the level of materials required to refine the magic weapon for Menghui does not need to be particularly high. She is already immortal, just ordinary. After getting ready, Zuyun whispered, "Fen Tianyan." Suddenly, Fen Tianyan jumped out from his palm. At this time, Zuyunke discovered that Fen Tianyan had undergone some subtle changes. Although the form looks the same as before, there is a trace of spirituality exuding in the swaying firelight. After suppressing Tang Zhuyang, he had been busy on his way and had not paid attention to Fen Tianyan. And now this is this. Did he swallow the effect of Tang Zhuyang's earth fire? Zuyun felt happy and communicated with Fen Tianyan. After a while, he was overjoyed. It turns out that if spiritual fire wants to become more powerful, in addition to constantly absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the essence of the sun and the moon, high-level spiritual fire can also strengthen itself by devouring low-level spiritual fire. Fen Tianyan is a sky fire, while Tang Zhuyang's is an earth fire. No wonder, at that time, it would take the initiative to communicate with Zuyun and want to eat the earth fire. I see. But Zuyun thought again and took out the intermediate furnace cauldron. Immediately, Fen Tianyan left Zuyun's hand and got under the furnace. Fen Tianyan's excitement was felt in his soul. It seems that Ye Xianming is right, this is a furnace that can warm and nourish spiritual fire. No wonder, at that time, he wanted to get this treasure no matter what. But how did Ye Xianming recognize this furnace? Zuyun was puzzled, and he didn't know what the mystery was. However, I was already determined in my heart. When I got out of the valley, I would move the cauldron to the day-glazed mirror. After recovering his thoughts, Zuyun also called Fen Tianyan back and began to refine the magical weapon for Menghui. It is said to be a magic weapon, but in fact it is more like a mortal necklace. The main thing is to make this fake wood spirit bead a pendant and stick it to Menghui's skin. He randomly took out some iron materials and used the burning sky flame to temper them into refined iron. Zuyun used another ingot of gold to turn it into gold powder and plate it on the fine iron chain. After fixing the fake wood spirit bead on the chain necklace, Zuyun thought for a while and decided to engrave a formation on it. As long as someone attacks, the formation can activate the protective formation. Limited by his realm, he can block at most 9 attacks during the foundation building period. After working hard until dawn, Zuyun finally finished making it. Looking at the somewhat tacky necklace, I am extremely satisfied. After all, this is the first time that I personally build a magic weapon for a person. Although this magical weapon is a bit too crude. When I went out, it was just getting light outside. The first ray of sunlight reaches the bottom of the valley. Next to the ditch, Menghui squatted aside, holding water with both hands and threw it on his face, and then scrubbed it carefully. As if he felt someone was looking at him, Menghui turned his head and met Zuyun's eyes, and his face turned red. "What are you looking at?" Menghui said coquettishly. "Look at you," Zuyun blurted out, not knowing what was wrong with this, and then said as he walked, "The magic weapon is ready, do you like it?" Walking in front of him, Menghui also stood up, and Zuyun handed over the necklace. Menghui looked surprised and said, "Wow, so beautiful." For hundreds of years, excluding the 500 years of suppression, Menghui was either practicing or killing. And she always shows herself as a little girl without any makeup. On the contrary, the past 10 years have been really colorful. It was also during this decade. She received 2 gifts. The meaning is different. What's the use of being pretty? Zuyun rolled his eyelids, feeling that female cultivators always have different concerns than male cultivators, and then said, "This one is a fake wood spirit bead. I don't know if it can extend your life. In addition, I am on the necklace. It's engraved with a formation that can withstand 10 attacks during the foundation period. If you're fine, just wear it." Zuyun, thank you. Menghui beamed with joy, stretched back and fiddled with the hair on his neck before putting on the necklace, revealing a touch of pink and white skin. After putting it on, he took off the hairpin from the top of his head and handed it to Zuyun. "You gave this to me back then, why don't you carve a formation for me too?" Zuyun smiled and said, "You still keep this thing that is used by mortals." Then, he shook his head again. "Mortal objects cannot be engraved with formations. They cannot carry spiritual power." Menghui blinked his eyes and said, "Why not? I don't want more. You just need to carve any formation you want. It doesn't matter if you use it once or twice." Upon hearing this, Zuyun suddenly had an idea flash in his mind. He subconsciously stared at the pseudo-wood spirit bead under Menghui's neck that glowed green under the sunlight. Times, magic weapon. Isn't this a talisman? For a moment, he felt that his mind was extremely clear. He suddenly felt that he understood the method of refining the talisman. Just like this hairpin cannot be engraved with formations. Because I was worried that this necklace was just made of ordinary fine iron, I reluctantly engraved the triggered protective formation. After 10 times, the necklace will break. If it is made normally, refined iron can only be used to create magical weapons used in the Qi refining period. But he just passed the number of times and suddenly rose to a level, resisting the attacks in the foundation building stage. Isn't this similar to Fubao? The reason why I am interested in talismans is not because materials of the same level can produce the ability to transcend levels. Zuyun's eyes became more and more happy, while Menghui's face turned redder. "Zuyun, what do you want to do when you stare at me like this?" Menghui's sweet cry brought Zuyun back from his thoughts. "Ah, I thought of something from the weapon refining industry." Zuyun quickly replied, if it weren't for the limited materials he had, he would have wanted to make a talisman for self-defense right now. Just like the talisman that can withstand those below the nascent soul stage. "Then go ahead and let me take a walk." Menghui blushed with embarrassment and turned around. When he saw Zuyun still standing there blankly, he couldn't help but spit in his heart. Fool. Afterwards, she did not stay and entered her own house. Zuyun recovered his mind and walked outside the house and said, "Menghui, I am going to retreat for a while, please don't disturb me. If you are hungry, just take some Bigo pills." Zuyun gently put down a bottle of elixir at the door, thought about it, and walked into the library. After placing a restriction, he ducked into the Dewu glazed mirror. Menghui was just immortal, and since he had already given instructions, he was not afraid that Menghui would discover his secret. The first thing Zuyun did after entering the mirror space was to place the cauldron outside the ranch courtyard. Then Fen Tianyan was summoned, and Fen Tianyan happily hid under the cauldron without any need for him to greet him. Zuyun then dodged again, entered the pasture, found a place at random, and began to sit down and practice. According to the news he got from Haile sect, the formation should continue to weaken in a few days. He wanted to take the opportunity to break through to the middle stage of foundation building, which would give him a better chance of winning. From the fact that the people from Hao City abducted Zhao Kamang, it can be seen that they were not properly prepared. They also learned from Ergu and others that Zhao Kamang's 2 front legs were destroyed, and that the people in Hao City would not even let go of such a sea monster, which meant that Zhao Kamang would be of great use to them. and before using it, you definitely need to recuperate. In this case, he should seize the time to practice and then sneak into the sea city to have a look. This time, Zuyun will not take anyone with him except Guzi. After the pasture fragments were taken away by Zuyun, the time flow speed difference here was also synchronized with the Diwu glazed mirror, reaching a ratio of 6:1 with the outside world. It's just that it's relatively empty here, and there won't be those elven potions peeking out, so Zuyun can practice with more peace of mind. Day to day. Zuyun never got up. He didn't know how many days it had been running until there was a soft sound at the platform, and then it started to vibrate. The gray turntable floating on the platform was originally spinning slowly, but it sped up a lot after the platform shook. At the same time, the situation in the entire ranch space changed. With Zuyun as the center, a huge spiritual vortex formed, and began to absorb the spiritual energy of the ranch crazily. Boom! Suddenly, there was an explosion in the sky, as if the sky was about to be exploded. Dark clouds appeared out of thin air and swept in again. Immediately afterwards, a heavy rain hit, and huge water droplets fell, as if they were going to engulf Zuyun whole. However, if anyone is watching here, they will definitely find that Zuyunpian's clothes are not wet. I don't know how much time passed. Watered by the rain, the ankle-high grass grew to waist-high, submerging Zuyun, who was sitting cross-legged. The dark clouds dispersed and the rain stopped quietly. There was no sun in the pasture, but the sky was naturally lit. Zuyun slowly opened his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curved. Breakthrough. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 214. Zuyun stood up. He never thought that this breakthrough would be so easy. He pinched his fingers gently and realized that only 15 days had passed in the pasture. To the outside world, it only lasts 2.5 days. Looking at the waist-high grass, he was secretly surprised. When he broke through, although he was completely immersed in it, he also knew what was happening here. There were dark clouds, heavy rain, and these weeds were growing like crazy. In fact, it is not an exaggeration to say that it is a spiritual grass. However, it is not to the level of a panacea. As far as he knew, this pasture fragment was originally a sacred object of Yaluo sect. But it was not refined by Luo Yanran and the previous Yaluo sect leaders. So, does this change require recognition of the Lord? While he was thinking, a dark shadow came rushing towards him. Hearing the footsteps, Zuyun looked up and suddenly smiled knowingly. It turned out to be the spirit horse. The horse was soaked to the skin and had obviously experienced a heavy rain. But instead of looking sluggish, it looked even more energetic as it snorted. Therefore, this rain is rain that contains spiritual power. What surprised Zuyun was not the wild growth of weeds, but why the rain contains spiritual power. By the way, where is your partner? Zuyun gently stroked the water drops from his mane and asked with a smile. Ba. Ba. The horse can understand human speech. First it raises its head, and then tilts it slightly to one side. Zuyun understood clearly that after the breakthrough, he felt extremely happy. He put his hands on the horse's back, jumped on it, and rode on it. Take me to see it. The horse spread its hooves and was extremely happy. Just because he also experienced some changes after receiving this spiritual rain. After running for about an hour, they climbed over a low hill, and Zuyun's eyes suddenly lit up. What you can see is a huge lake like a mirror. The mortal horse was by the lake, lowering its head and sipping the water. With a thought in his mind, Zuyun swept his spiritual consciousness over. Fanma seemed to sense something and looked up towards Zuyun. But after just one glance, he quickly lowered his head. Zuyun was extremely surprised. This place was just a depression at first, but now, you can't even see the edge at a glance. This is enough to show how big this lake is. What is even more surprising is that the spiritual power of the mortal horse is slightly revealed, and it is obvious that there are signs of transformation into a spiritual horse. When Mama entered this place, it was less than a month in total based on the time in the mirror, but there were such earth-shaking changes. If I have nothing to do and collect more rare birds and beasts, I'm afraid they will all become spirits. But after thinking about it, Zuyun put this idea behind him. After all, the scene where he was practicing until he was unconscious and being surrounded by a crowd of elixirs made him laugh and cry. I'm afraid this ranch isn't that simple. Zuyun murmured, turned over and got off the horse, then smiled and said, "Take care of it here, I will come to see you after a while." After leaving the ranch, Zuyun returned to the mirror space. Nothing much has changed here, except that the burning sky flame under the cauldron, which had not been seen for several days, actually grew a little stronger. This cauldron can even warm and nourish heavenly fire, so it must not be a mortal thing. He touched his chin and decided not to take Fen Tianyan out for the time being. Being under the furnace is far better than being in one's own dungeon. After staying in the mirror for a while, he looked through external fire technique, turtle breath sutra, and 5 elements escape technique. Zuyun gained some understanding of these 3 techniques. External fire technique is a method of controlling spiritual fire, which is completely different from spiritual fire symbiosis technique. For example, Tang Zhuyang was able to control the earth fire to follow Zuyun, which was a mysterious method in this method. Zuyun doesn't want to learn it for the time being, because Fen Tianyan is a sky fire and is still weak at this time. If it is used for tracking, it is very likely that the chicken will be stolen but the rice will be lost, and it will be taken away by other strong people. The Turtle Breath Sutra is a technique for concentrating qi. By holding your breath, you can collect all your own qi. But the real effect is not great, because when using this technique, you cannot move at all, otherwise your whereabouts will be exposed. In Zuyun's opinion, instead of doing this, it would be more practical to use the immortality secret to run and jump as soon as possible. Anyone who makes him hold his breath must be a strong person above the elixir formation stage. But under the pill formation stage, he had no way to hide. Are you being motionless and acting like a bastard? This method really explains this truth. On the contrary, the last book 5 elements escape technique made Zuyun extremely happy. This tactic is to use the attributes of the location and then use the corresponding tactic to escape. For example, if you are in a sandy land, you can use one of the earth shield techniques. If you have water, use the water escape technique. Where there are trees, you can use the wood escape technique. It's just that trees must grow in the soil, which is far less useful than the earth escape technique. On the contrary, it was the golden shield technique and the fire escape technique that made Zuyun a little confused. But when I think about it, I feel relieved. I guess the first 3 can be understood, but the latter 2 are used by the people who created this technique to make up the numbers. Not to mention whether there is a suitable place to escape with the golden escape technique, but with the fire escape Ju alone, could someone else use fire to burn you and you use the fire to escape? Unless it's a sea of fire, where can you escape? But if it is a sea of fire, I am afraid that I will be burned too, right? Zuyun shook his head and smiled, majored in water escape technique and earth escape Ju, and took a cursory look at wood escape Ju before leaving the space in the mirror. The ban is still there and no one has come. Withdrawing casually, Zuyun went downstairs to the valley. It's noon outside. Mengwei was having nothing to do, sitting on the edge of the ditch. She took off her shoes, and her bare white jade feet splashed freely. Zuyun was playful and used the earth escape technique. But before he could emerge from the soil, he heard Mengwei suddenly speak. Zuyun, have you made a breakthrough? Although Mengwei is not in the realm, he still has some feeling after all. Even if Zuyun didn't make a sound, she immediately turned around. But Zuyun's figure was not found. but Mengwei didn't pay much attention to it. After all, Zuyun's previous immortality secret footwork was unpredictable, let alone that she couldn't discover it now that she was immortal. Zuyun stepped out from behind Mengwei, nodded with a smile and said, "It's time for me to go." Mengwei looked over, a trace of reluctance flashed in his eyes, but he quickly put it away and said, "I'll wait for you. Take care of yourself." Zuyun thought for a while, then took out the external fire ju he had obtained from Tang Juyang and handed it over, saying, "You have spiritual fire after all. Take a look at this fire tactic, I don't think it will be useful to you." Mengwei was not polite. He took it with a smile and said, "Even if I learn it now, I'm afraid it will be useless." As he spoke, he touched his flat belly. "I can clearly feel the spiritual fire sleeping here, but I don't know how to wake it up. Then wait until I find the elixir of immortality for you." After saying that, Zuyun quickly walked through the 9 turns and 9 suns formation without stopping and left the valley. Not long after, he is already in the main hall of the sect master. Sun Qiniang is in the palace, teaching Zhou Ruyu and Zhu Feng how to practice swords respectively. It's just that the two people practiced differently. Zuyun didn't know Zhou Ruyu's swordsmanship, and he must have come from Wanjian Mountain. On the contrary, Zhu Feng, without spiritual power, danced the wooden sword over and over again. "Zuyun, are you leaving?" Seeing that it was Zuyun, Sun Qiniang stepped forward and asked softly. "Well, go early and come back early. How is your injury?" "Nothing serious." Sun Qiniang glanced at the two people who were distracted by Zuyun's arrival, then turned her head again. "Be careful along the way." Zuyun nodded. The two had experienced the battle with Tang Juyang together and seemed to have more tacit understanding without the need for too many words. "I want to take someone with me. They are all in the cave under the misty sword cliff. It's just right for them to watch, and I can also have time to teach them how to practice swordsmanship." Zuyun smiled and said, "I will only take one person with me, and you can continue to teach here. Take senior brother Zhou. Bring another one." Sun Qiniang frowned. "He is only at the 2nd level of qi refining, has it been useful in the past?" "Of course it works. And it's very useful. Just take care of it." Sun Qiniang turned around and expressed her reluctance in her brief words. But he also knew that Zuyun was devoted to the Tao and had no desire for lust. As a woman, how could she not know that just like Mengwei, Zuyun also responded in this way? "Farewell." Zuyun turned around and left, running all the way to the misty sword cliff. "3 dogs, come with me." Rushing to the cave, Zuyun shouted loudly. The two of them ran out of the cave together. Ergu has regained his manhood, using the familiar, ancestral craftsmanship, and his braided braids swaying from side to side as he runs. "Xiaozu, won't you take me? I'll be back." Zuyun smiled and said that he thought Ergu was afraid of leaving him. Ergu shook his head and said, "Xiaozu, I have thought about it for a long time and decided to stay in Lingjian sect like junior sister son." As soon as these words came out, Zuyun was stunned. In his ears, there was the sighing sound of a dog's nose, and he should have known the reason for it. "I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills." Author, Banzhuan Xianxia. Chapter 215. Zuyun pondered for a moment and said, "Let's not mention this for now, I will come back. Let's talk about it then." After only a few days of separation, he made this decision. Zuyun hoped that he was impulsive. Let him calm down for a while. "Okay, then you go." Zuyun took out the elementary elixirs and talismans and handed them over. With his current level of qi refining 9th level, he could only use these. After Ergu took it, he turned around and returned to the cave. Guza said, "Second brother, see you later." On the flying boat, Zuyun discovered a problem. The spirit stones were somewhat insufficient. He looked at the dog's nose with sharp eyes and said, "You still have 500 spirit stones with you, right?" The dog's nose was startled, and he subconsciously covered his waist, saying in shock, "Big boss, this is all my wealth." After getting along with Go for a while, he regarded Big Go as his eldest brother by default, and naturally changed his name to Zuyun. "I'm not asking you for it now," Zuyun rolled his eyes and said, "I don't have many spiritual stones, and you and I are not proficient in water properties. If we go to the sea formation, we must still rely on this flying boat." Upon hearing this, Gozi immediately understood what Zuyun meant. However, he told Zuyun that he didn't know water nature either, and he said dissatisfiedly, "Boss, you don't know water nature, but I know it?" Zuyun was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "Yes, you are a dog, you can dog paw." Gaobi always felt that Zuyun was scolding him, but he seemed unable to refute. In order to save the spirit stones, Zuyun let the flying boat land, and with a thought, he summoned the two horses from the pasture. Zuyun distinguished them according to the color of their manes and named them Xiao Brown and Xiao Gray respectively. Little Brown was naturally the first one to become a spirit horse. One person and one rider, Zuyun and Gaobi, headed towards the direction of Hyo City. This is outside the patrol range of Hyo City, so they don't need to suppress their speed. Soon, the two of them arrived at the place where the fierce battle took place yesterday. The bodies are all gone, and there are footprints on the ground, which means someone discovered them yesterday. Dog Nose looked at the ground and said, "There was indeed a lot of movement yesterday, and there were no patrols in front. They must have been on guard." Zuyun looked up, thought for a moment, and said, "If you want to go to Hyo City again, it will be easy to scare the snake, and you can't determine Zhao Kamang's location." "Boss, then we go directly to the sea formation." Gaobi remembered the location of the formation and stayed in Yunzhou for many years just for the spiritual fire. But now, even if he searches for the spiritual fire, he will probably get it by Zuyun. "I would like to go directly, but I don't know if the people in Hyo City have made any arrangements at the moment." "How about this, we don't have to enter the city, just slowly get closer, as long as we can observe the movement of Hyo City." Although Zuyun had subdued Gaobi, the tone of his words seemed to be asking for Gaobi's opinion. This made Gozabai feel a little moved. "That's good. There are quite a few sea monsters outside the big formation. If you are not careful, you will cause chaos among the beasts, which will be discovered by the people of Hyo City." Gaobi nodded repeatedly, agreeing with Zuyun's decision. In this case, Zuyun hesitated for a moment, but took out the Turtle Breath Sutra from his hand and said, "You are not strong enough, so why not learn this technique? If you and I get separated in the formation, at least you can hide." Gaobi was overjoyed when he heard this. He fled from the Fire Dragon sect in a hurry and fled all the way to Yunzhou. Who would have thought that the things he stole from it contained no techniques at all except the techniques for refining qi? The reason why I stayed in Fangxi was actually to get a copy of the exercises to practice for self-protection. But coming from the Peeper realm, he has a very high vision. How can there be any technique in Yunzhou that can catch his eye? Now, Zuyun actually gave him a copy directly, how could he not be ecstatic? "Thank you, boss. Old dog, ah no, puppy. My gratitude to boss is like a torrential river." "Shut up. Okay." Goza quickly opened the first page of turtle breathing technique. At a glance, he could see that this technique was extremely mysterious. After thinking about it carefully, he knew that it was good stuff. "Boss, when can I practice?" Zuyun had already taken back the two horses. The closer he got to Hyo City, the more careful he had to be. The dog's nose is holding the turtle breathing sutra with a look of eagerness to try. "I'll show you first. When I find a suitable location, I'll let you practice." Zuyun was secretly amused, but when he thought about it, he was no better than him when he got the 5 elements of Chaos Sutra, so he felt relieved. The two of them suppressed their steps and moved forward slowly. It was not until dark that they saw the location of Hyo City in the distance. The lights were brightly lit there and people were still coming and going, obviously something was going on. You can practice for a while, and I'll take advantage of the night to get closer. Zuyun gave an order, and after swallowing an intermediate breath-condensing pill, he quietly walked towards Hyo City with the immortality secret. The rebuilt Hyo City was several times larger than the previous city. However, the small slope where Zuyun dismounted was not built. Zuyun wanted to go to that small slope to watch. Gaobi also started practicing the turtle breathing technique after Zuyun agreed. Indeed, this technique is quite suitable for him now. Zuyun is already in the middle stage of foundation building. If he accidentally gets lost, he can protect himself if it is an extremely dangerous place. The first step is to practice the breathing method. Dog Nose can learn it in a formal way and can master it quickly. Just practice more and you'll get better. But in excitement, Gaobi continued to practice the second step. But half an hour passed, and there was no progress at all. It's weird, Dog Nose touched his head, is it because I don't have enough spiritual power or a lack of realm? After much thought, Goza decided to take a pill. But in his entire storage bag, apart from the 500 spirit stones, there was only the soul control pill. Forget it, I've already eaten a lot anyway, so I don't miss this one. Dog Nose muttered to himself, throwing a pill into his mouth like he was eating jelly beans. In the Danshan, the spiritual energy started to move. It is repeatedly purified and tempered, and flows throughout the body. Sudden. He heard a subtle voice coming from his mind. In an instant, the meridians all over my body felt much smoother. Huh? Did you achieve a breakthrough? The dog's nose was stunned. Is it that simple? Before he could react, the momentum around him suddenly surged, and the spiritual energy around him also began to surge. This is particularly eye-catching in the dark of night. Outside Hyo City, the monks patrolling immediately noticed something and looked over here. There's someone there. A foundation building stage man said in a deep voice. Let's go over and take a look. Although the momentum is a little weak, the leader has already given instructions not to let any young people go. With an order, 2 more foundation building stages walked out of the darkness. A total of 3 people stepped on their swords and flew quickly towards the direction of the dog's nose. Seeing someone suddenly flying up, it was still 3 people in the foundation building stage. Zuyun was secretly glad in his heart. Fortunately, he was careful, otherwise he would definitely be discovered. But when he looked again, he saw that these 3 foundation building stages were actually flying towards the dog's nose, and his pupils shrank involuntarily. Let's not mention the loyalty of the dog's nose for now. But after entering the formation, you can quickly find the relationship with the spiritual fire. How could he die here? Immediately, he stopped hiding and immediately took out the middle-grade spiritual sword and rushed to the rescue. No, there's an ambush there. As soon as Zuyun moved, his spiritual power suddenly emerged. The 3 foundation building stages also immediately discovered where Zuyun was. The leader shouted, and several more foundation building stages jumped up from under the slope. Zuyun felt bad. But fortunately, he didn't want to fight to the death with these people, but to save the dog's nose. He didn't care at all, he used his spiritual power crazily, and controlled the flying sword to fly towards the dog's nose. Feeling so many scents, Dog Nose was completely stunned. But at this time, he was in the critical period of breakthrough, and his body could not move at all, otherwise his Danshan would be damaged. It can range from going crazy to being possessed, or dying on the spot. The longer you live, the more you fear death. Not to mention that Gozi escaped here from Peeper Realm just to survive. Zuyun saw that the three foundation building stages didn't care about him at all, and behind him, there were several people chasing him. If you want to save the dog's nose, you must take action now. But the Firebird talisman on him has been used up, and the sword is at his feet. At this moment, he can only use the fire-lifting curse. In the flash of lightning, Zuyun made a decision. Li Huo. He shouted low, and Li Huo rose from the palm of his hand, swaying under the strong wind, illuminating his whole body and lighting up a beacon for the pursuers. But Zuyun couldn't care too much. He just wants to save the dog's nose, and then use the flying bow to escape from here. Go to me. Zuyun suddenly threw out his right hand, and Li Huo transformed into a dragon shape, roaring and rushing towards the three foundation building stages. Suddenly, the momentum was huge, and the night was like day. Everyone in Hao City noticed this place, and countless foundation building monks rose into the sky and gathered crazily towards Zuyun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 216. Be careful. Feeling the boundless firepower coming from behind, the three foundation building period changed their expressions and turned around. Seeing the fire column that was like a fire dragon, they knew that if they didn't resist, they would be burned to ashes. Form a formation, block it. The leading foundation building period reacted very quickly and made a prompt decision. They came from the same cave, and were good at combined attacks, and were also good at forming a formation for defense. After the voice fell, the other two did not hesitate and madly circulated their spiritual power. This fire dragon can't be stopped, so what's the use of keeping more spiritual power in the body? When the fire dragon was about to engulf the three people, their formation had already formed. A water mist-like shield protected all three people in it. Boom! The fire column instantly engulfed the three people, making a violent sound. Under Zuyun's control, the fire column kept entwining, like a huge python strangling its prey, surrounding it. Zuyun's goal was not to kill people, but to save people. While the three people were trapped by Li Huo, he ignored them and rushed to the location of Gaobazai with all his strength. Finally, in Gaobazai's frightened eyes, Zuyun landed in front of him. Why are you breaking through? Feeling the fluctuation of spiritual power on him, Zuyun finally understood why Gaobazai was discovered. Gaobazai was extremely regretful. If he hadn't been eager for success, how could he have fallen into such a situation? Who breaks through without finding a safe place? I have been living on a dog for thousands of years. But he couldn't see or speak at this time. Not to mention moving. Zuyun looked up in the direction of Hao City. Under the moonlight, the colorful light spots were getting bigger and bigger. It seemed that the foundation building cultivators over there were moving all over the city. Sangu, if you stay here, you and I will definitely die. I'll take you away first. Compared with the consequences of Gaobazai's failure to break through, it is obviously better to escape than to leave your life here. Zuyun shouted at him, and just as he was about to throw out the flying boat in his sleeve, a pressure from the peak of the late stage of foundation building descended from the sky and quickly locked onto Zuyun. At the same time, a sense of crisis came, making Zuyun's hair stand on end. Killing move. He was horrified, and he didn't care about anything else. He wanted to use the talisman to resist first, but just as he was about to use his left hand to hold it and prepare to meet it, he suddenly thought that the talisman could protect himself, but the dog nose could not be spared. No. In a hurry, Zuyun immediately retracted his left hand and turned to face the sky with his right palm. All the spiritual power in his body was drained at this moment. Chaos palm. As his roar resounded through the sky, Zuyun concentrated all his strength on his right palm. The terrifying pressure was instantly dispersed, and this palm was also formed. And the peak of the late stage of foundation building that came straight down from the sky had no time to dodge, and was completely swallowed up by the palm power. Every time a palm force passed by, it seemed to take away a little of his intelligence. When he could no longer feel the palm force, his consciousness was gone. Chaos palm, one strike to kill the peak of the late foundation building stage. But Zuyun was not much better at this time. He lost all his spiritual power and looked listless. Fortunately, the power of this palm shocked all the foundation building stages. Leader! Leader Hai! Hai Moyan! Although they did not dare to step forward, the incredible roars came overwhelmingly. They saw with their own eyes that the strongest and ruler in the sea city was beaten to pieces by Zuyun, who was in the middle stage of foundation building. Zuyun had no time to be happy about who he had killed, but tried his best to sacrifice the flying boat, and with the power of his body, he directly hugged the dog's nose. The dog's nose was broken during the breakthrough, and was immediately attacked by the spiritual power, spitting blood from his mouth, splashing Zuyun all over. Zuyun ignored him, and after settling him down, he immediately controlled the flying boat with his mind. A golden light flashed through everyone's eyes, and they came to their senses. This foundation building period was actually trying to escape. Chase! This boy actually killed my people from the Sea Region City, and also killed the Sea Alliance Master. Don't let him get away. He has lost all his spiritual power. The stagnant figure suddenly accelerated, and the light of various magic weapons flashed, chasing Zuyun. But Zuyun's flying boat was a magic weapon of the Jindan period. How could they catch up? Although Zuyun had no power, this flying boat could be driven by spirit stones, and the speed was not affected at all. After just a few breaths, the golden light turned into a light spot in their eyes, and they could only watch and be out of reach. He went to the sea. A strong monk floating in the air shouted loudly. Master, yeah, it's too fast, there's no way to chase. Another person said on the side. Yes. Now that the leader of the Sea Alliance is dead, the Sea Region City needs to elect a new leader as soon as possible. That's right, otherwise the Sea Region City will be like a pile of loose sand. Now, for those who have appeal, I recommend Qin Tianzu from the Sea Monster Cave Heaven. Qin Tianzu is quite cunning, I'm afraid it's not appropriate, I think Wei Zhentian is good. People left and the tea got cold. Seeing that they couldn't catch up with Zuyun, the people of the Sea Region City obviously forgot about the newly dead Hai Moyan and began to seek benefits for themselves. Zuyun kept paying attention to the back, and when he found that no one was chasing him, he took out a pill and swallowed it. With the speed of this flying boat, it is still very safe within the scope of Yunzhou. Unless someone in the nascent soul stage comes. However, this is impossible. After swallowing the next pill and barely recovering some spiritual power, he noticed the dog nose sitting beside him, and his face froze. He was weak, blood all over his body, and his mouth was even like a bleeding wound, constantly oozing fresh blood. Sango, why are you so serious? Zuyun shouted in shock. He thought that he had just broken through the small realm of the qi refining period, and even if he was backlashed, it would not be too serious. Who would have thought that it felt even more serious than Menghui at the beginning? Boss, boss. To say a word, Go Bazai almost used up all his strength. It was very difficult, and he forced himself to say the reason. I was originally a dog, although I have grown up, I still have defects. I swallowed the waste pill, the elixir that stores spiritual power, has not been completely transformed into the Danshan. This breakthrough, the spiritual power backfired, the Danshan was damaged, more seriously. I feel, I am almost dying. I can't control myself. As his voice faded, Zuyun became more and more anxious. But he had never experienced such a situation before, and was at a loss for a moment. Maybe Gaobi knew that he was going to die, and he seemed to have thought it through. He took another breath and said, "Boss, if I die, if I am in human form, I beg you to cremate me. If I return to my original form, find a place to bury me. No, I won't let you die." Zuyun said this without even thinking. Indeed, when he first subdued Gaobi, he wanted to use his amazing sense of smell to help him find treasure. But at this time, he suffered such a serious injury, which could almost be said to be caused by himself. But Gaobi did not blame Zuyun in his words, which made Zuyun feel guilty. "Boss, really, I feel I can't control myself." Gaobi knew clearly that if Zuyun could find a way, he would not be so anxious. "This is just to comfort me." At the same time, he felt that his body was constantly changing and twisting. A strange and familiar feeling gradually returned to him. It seemed that his lips were growing forward, and there was an inexplicable change in his mouth. He felt sore, numb, and itchy on his body, and was stained with blood, just like when he first arrived at the Fire Dragon sect. He went to the hot spring to play in the water and just climbed out. Instinct told him that his body was soaked. He needed to shake it off to get rid of his body. But his consciousness was getting heavier and heavier, and he was simply unable to do this. Gaobi didn't know that Zuyun stared at him blankly, and a hint of joy gradually emerged between his expressions. At the moment when his eyelids closed, Zuyun also made a decision. While he was still able to breathe, he reached out and put his hand on the bloody dog nose, to be precise, on the dog nose that had returned to its original form. "Go in!" Zuyun shouted in a low voice, and the dog nose's figure disappeared instantly. He pondered for a moment, lowered his head and looked down. From the sky, the dark blue sea surface looked like a huge mouth that would swallow everything. Zuyun did not hesitate and controlled the flying boat to begin landing. Under the moonlight, some scattered islands gradually appeared in his eyes. He randomly selected an island full of barren rocks and used his only spiritual power to transform into spiritual consciousness to scan it. After confirming that it was safe, he landed steadily, then put away the flying boat, and flashed into the Dao glass mirror. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 217. After appearing in the cave in the mirror, Zuyun rushed towards the ranch entrance without saying a word. When passing by the medicinal garden, he didn't know what he was thinking, and summoned the burning sky flame into his body. Thinking about it before, it was lucky. If it weren't for the chaos palm, I would be the one who was afraid of death. It's better to carry the burning sky flame with you when you go out. After rushing into the ranch, Zuyun blew a whistle. Xiaozong came from afar, and he didn't wait there, but went to meet him. "Did you see a dog come in?" When he met Xiaozong, Zuyun immediately jumped on the horse and asked. Xiaozong tilted his head and ran in the direction he came from. Zuyun was happy in his heart. Xiaozong could understand human language. It looked like he must have known where the dog's nose went after he took it in. In half a cup of tea, Xiaozong climbed over the top of the hill and looked down. He saw a white figure lying by the water. In this pasture, there are no other animals except 2 horses. This white dog must be Gaobizai without a doubt. Zuyun hurriedly asked Xiaozong Ben to go forward. After reaching the water, he jumped off the horse and immediately put his hand on Gaobizai's head. Just now, Gaobizai's body was still moving slightly, but his breath was very weak. If the fake wood spirit bead was here, it would be able to stabilize his life. Now, we can only explore Gaobizai's body to find out the crux of the problem and then find a way to treat him. As Zuyun spread his spiritual consciousness in Gaobizai's body, his brows also frowned. From the information currently explored, the situation is not optimistic. The reason why Gaobizai can still survive is that in addition to being a spiritual beast, he also relied on various high-quality spiritual medicine residues as food when he was a beast, which improved his physique. In addition, Gao Bazai's breathing slowed down and his body consumption also slowed down. Even though his body was in a mess, he could still hold on for some time. However, because the breakthrough was interrupted, the spiritual power backfired extremely heavily, and at the same time triggered the already defective spiritual pill, which caused such a serious injury. Zuyun did not know about the spiritual pills of spirit beasts. He only knew that the demon pills of demon beasts were the core of spiritual power, similar to the dantian of human race, which was used to store demon power. Like Zhao Kamang, he collected demon pills to practice the 10,000 demons art before, which was to transform demon power for practice. It was just an accident that he could not control in the end and turned into a demon beast instead. But the situation of Go Bazai was different. He turned from a spirit beast into a human, but the transformation pill swallowed by adults was a waste pill. Now it was the same situation again, and he had no idea where to start. I don't know if spirit beasts have purple palaces. Zuyun thought in his heart, and then he raised his spiritual consciousness all the way up, and finally entered his head. A dark shadow was constantly twisting and changing, and in the process of changing, the entire volume was shrinking. Suddenly, Zuyun saw a familiar mark, and a flash of inspiration suddenly appeared in his mind. This mark is the control mark left by swallowing the Yukui soul pill. So, the black shadow is the soul of Go Bazai. His soul is shrinking, which means that the power of the soul is also disintegrating, so that he can't control the spiritual power in his body to cause damage. So, if I strengthen his soul, can I solve this problem? Thinking of this, Zuyun immediately retracted his spiritual consciousness, and slightly opened his right hand, and the burning sky flame was summoned. Burning sky flame, Zuyun said in a deep voice, help Sango burn the mark on his soul. If you hurt him in the slightest, don't blame me for being rude to you. Burning sky flame is now extremely respectful to Zuyun, and naturally dare not go against his mind. When Zuyun finished speaking, he rushed straight into Go Bazai's head. The extreme high temperature did not hurt a hair of Go Bazai. Zuyun's spiritual consciousness followed closely and followed in. I saw the burning sky flame floating in the void, carefully separating a trace of fire power, burning the mark. He had done it countless times in Juyang Tower, and now he was even more familiar with it. Soon, the fire burned down the mark, and it was immediately tempered into a trace of soul power, which was then absorbed by the soul of Go Bai. With this extremely pure soul power supplement, although Go Bai's soul was still twisted, it no longer shrank. Instead, it began to slowly grow. After an unknown amount of time, all the marks were eliminated. The burning sky flame left Go Bai's mind without lingering. Zuyun observed for a while, and after finding that Go Bai had no more accidents, he turned his spiritual consciousness to his lower abdomen. Sure enough, the out-of-control spiritual power no longer rushed around and destroyed wantonly. Instead, it slowly moved closer to the elixir. However, the range of absorption of the elixir was very limited. But overall, the situation seemed to be developing in a good direction. Zuyun then breathed a long sigh of relief and returned his spiritual consciousness to his body. He opened his eyes and looked at the body of Dog Nose, which had undergone some changes. His breathing became steady and powerful, and his abdomen was no longer as disorderly as before. Dog Nose, I have tried my best. From now on, it depends on your luck. Although you have turned back into a dog, you have saved your life. Didn't you say that you have mastered the skills to cultivate into a human? I will wait for the day when you become a human again. The ranch is extremely safe, so Zuyun doesn't need to worry. At this time, he also needs to recover his spiritual power as soon as possible. After leaving the ranch, Zuyun threw the burning sky flame under the furnace, and entered the cave to practice. By the time his spiritual power was fully restored, several hours had passed. He murmured to himself, saying, the stronger the enemy will be in the future. Although the chaos palm is useful, it can only be used once. After one time, if you can't escape, you will still die. I don't know if there is a pill recipe in the pill recipe cabinet that can instantly replenish spiritual power. But you can only break through to the stage of forming a pill before you can open it. So, if you have time in the future, you still have to intensify your practice. Zuyun made up his mind that after taking the great array spirit fire and going to Chuzhu to fulfill the last wish of the predecessor, he would find a place to concentrate on practicing. With the time treasure such as the Dao glazed mirror, he had less time to concentrate on practicing. For a moment, he remembered Menghui's words again. You have a great destiny, but you are always tied down by human affairs. It seems that Menghui knows me better than I do. He couldn't help but smile and left the Dao glass mirror. On the deserted island, the sea breeze was howling. The salty and fishy air brushed across Zuyun's face. He looked up at the sky. It was late at night. Looking forward, the sea and the sky were the same color again, as if they had merged into one. It will be light in about 2 hours, just in time to practice for a day. Zuyun had just made a decision in the mirror, and it was impossible for him to forget it as soon as he turned around. Just as he was about to go back, several bright lights suddenly flashed in the darkness. He stood still and squinted at the light. I saw that those lights were connected by many light spots. The light spots fluctuated, sometimes rising and sometimes falling. Even, they were moving slowly towards the east, not very fast. Zuyun stared at it in a trance, wondering if it was some sea monster, but he didn't think it was. After looking carefully for a while, Zuyun realized that this light spot would never fall on the sea surface, and his heart couldn't help but shudder. Could it be a ship? The ship of Hiu City? He thought about it and ruled out this possibility. When he fled, he heard many cultivators shouting for the leader. If the person he killed was the leader, then Hiu City would not be fighting for power, but at least there would be a lack of people giving orders. It's impossible to move so quickly and send a ship into the sea to find the formation. Then, who else? Zuyun racked his brains, and suddenly his eyes lit up. Now, Tang Zhuyang, who knows about the formation in the sea, was suppressed by him in the Lingjian sect. Hiu City must be like loose sand. Then, it can only be highly sect. Thinking of this possibility, Zuyun was overjoyed. Just when he was thinking about whether to chase after it, he suddenly stopped. Although Li Daqin and Shi Boluo had no ill will towards him, they had already clearly refused to go with him. If he showed up suddenly, would it cause misunderstanding? Just as he was struggling, a roar came from the far east. Zuyun was shocked. What kind of monster was making such a loud noise? But after listening carefully, he found that the sound seemed to be countless monsters shouting at the same time. He couldn't help but think of what Li Daqin said before, that countless monsters gathered outside the formation. Could it be that the formation had changed? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 218. Besides knowing that there is spiritual fire in the sea formation, the only news Zuyun knows is that there are countless monsters outside the formation. He knows nothing about other things. But now that all the beasts are roaring, it is hard to guarantee whether the energy of the formation has been completely lost, and there will be no more obstacles. If so, if these monsters enter the formation and affect his acquisition of spiritual fire, then it will be a waste of time. Thinking of this, Zuyun can't care too much, so he immediately sacrifices the flying boat, jumps on it, and flies quickly to the east. In the dark night, the golden light emitted by the flying boat broke through the air and also attracted the attention of Li Daqin and others. Daqin, look at that light, it's very fast. Before Shibola and Li Daqin became Taoist partners, they lived in the sea for a long time. Every time they took a boat, they would keep their eyes and ears open. She discovered the strange phenomenon in the sky at a glance. This doesn't look like a monster, and it doesn't look like the speed of a foundation building cultivator flying with a flying tool. Li Daqin also came from Chuzhu, and he was knowledgeable and was shocked. Could it be a great man in the Jindan stage? When he said this, Shibola couldn't help but tremble all over. It's hard to say. Li Daqin took a deep breath and said, but no matter what, this person must have been attracted by the roar just now. Our boat is not fast, I'm afraid it will be slower. Shibola gritted his teeth and said, we can only blame our bad luck. However, if it is really a senior in the Jindan stage, it is not a bad thing. At least, if there are natural treasures in the formation that attract him, he will try his best to break it. At worst, let him eat meat and we drink soup. Li Daqin's eyes flickered and nodded. No matter how many natural treasures there are, what's the point if you lose your life? The two looked at each other and quickly fell silent. After a while, Shibola ordered all the lights on the ship to be turned off to avoid misunderstandings from the man in the air. On the other side, this huge beast roar also reached the sea area city. The people who were still arguing stopped immediately. Haimoyan is dead, but the formation still needs to be explored. With such a huge momentum, the leaders of any faction have noticed that the formation has changed. They are not willing to stay here. They all return to their respective areas, gather people, and use their own magical powers to rush towards the formation. Not only that, the roar of the beast also spread into the deep sea. Some monks who have no sex and have lived on some deserted islands in the sea for a long time were also alarmed. They all came out of retreat and wanted to find out what was going on. At this time, outside the formation, countless sea monsters had red eyes and were full of madness. The hideous heads floated on the sea, and the bodies submerged in the sea, letting the sea water ripple, but they did not move. The strange thing is that they all faced the direction of the formation, as if they were devout believers. At the edge of the formation, several monks from the sea monster cave were hiding behind the monsters they controlled and trembling. The earth-shattering roar just now almost shattered their membranes. If it weren't for their own monsters that block some of the sound waves, and if they were not strong enough, they would have turned into a cold corpse. But even so, they were still terrified and frightened. Is it a beast king born? One of them came to his senses and said tremblingly. In the sea, there is a legend about the beast king. The beast king occupies one side and commands all the monsters within the range. Not only is it powerful, but it is also huge and unmatched. This is also one of the reasons why they want to develop on the shore. How do I know, Brother Li, what should I do now? The other person was already at a loss, and he trembled all over when he heard about the beast king. I should have known that I shouldn't have been greedy at that time. In order to earn more spirit stones, I chose to continue waiting here. The other person regretted it very much. Leaning his head out secretly, he saw monsters of various shapes, which seemed to be out of control at any time, so he immediately retracted his head. It was easy to get in before, but it is difficult to escape now. Among the dense beasts, there are some monsters that they have avoided before. Such monsters can usually spray water jets to knock them down from the air. Just when the three were at a loss, there was a loud noise behind them. They turned around quickly, but saw that the barrier of the formation behind them, which almost merged with the sea and sky, was cracked layer by layer. Like an old wall that has been in disrepair and ravaged by the years, the outer layer is peeling off. This is... The leader's eyes lit up. It seems that the energy of this formation has been exhausted and the barrier has opened. We have been staying here for more than half a year, and the energy of this barrier has been weakening. Could it be that the formation is about to open? The three looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. The previous fear was swept away. In other words, they don't need to gather the power of the entire sea city to break this formation before they can enter it. In fact, the earliest they sent the message back was 3 days ago. At that time, The message also specifically stated that the time had not come yet. In other words, all the treasures in this formation belong to the three of them. For a moment, their breathing became rapid, and greed appeared in the eyes of the three people. They had long forgotten the danger of being among thousands of beasts. It seems that those monsters just passed by and roared for some reason, which just happened to break this barrier. Facing the upcoming opportunity, one of them shook his head and analyzed it. Brother Lee is right. We only need to wait for a while until this formation is completely destroyed, and then we can enter it. That's right. Everything in this formation belongs to the three of us. Since we are so destined, why don't we become brothers of different surnames today? Haha, this is a good suggestion. There are countless natural treasures in this formation. In the future, the three of us may be able to dominate Yunzhou. Let's start while the formation is not broken. I'm Li Ying. I'm Zhao Sheng. I'm Qiancheng. The three of them pointed to the sky and said in unison, "Today, we are here, with the way of heaven as a witness, and we will become brothers of different surnames from now on. We share happiness and difficulties together. We don't ask to be born on the same day of the same month of the same year, but we ask to die on the same month of the same year." The voice fell. In the sky, an inconspicuous stream of light fell. As it fell on the sea, it split into three parts, all falling between the three people's foreheads, and then quickly disappeared. At this time, the formation could no longer hold on, and the remaining energy collapsed, and the loud noise resounded through the sky again. The three people were overjoyed and stood up to look into the formation. They saw that an island like a fairyland suddenly appeared in front of them. Green mountains and green waters, and the spiritual energy was dense. They were amazed and didn't think about why there was such an unreasonable place in the sea area, and they rushed forward immediately. However, they were fast, and the monsters behind them were faster. The sea water surged, and those monsters with red eyes also pounced on them. They didn't kill people, but just the turbulent flow of demonic power quickly strangled them into blood foam. These three people couldn't believe it at all. The oath they just made was fulfilled after a few breaths. The three people died, and the monsters they controlled were also strangled by the demonic power caused by the sea monster that pounced on them. Even the sea monsters that attacked in front would die inexplicably before landing on the island. The extremely strong monster bodies would explode in an instant, turning into blood foam and scattering in the sea. But these monsters were affected by the bloody aura and became even crazier. They kept coming one after another, as if they would never stop fighting. Under the night, the dark blue sea water gradually turned dark red. And it continued to spread around, until the sun jumped out on the sea level in the far east. Soon, the peaceful light fell here, finally dispelling some of the coldness and weirdness. The island is still the same. The fairyland is still the same. The blood is still the same. And the countless monsters have disappeared. Obviously, all died here. As the sun rises, the clouds above the island also gradually dissipate. The fairyland reveals its true appearance. At the highest peak in the center of the island, there seems to be a figure dancing in the wind. The figure is graceful and graceful. The island is so beautiful, but a strange scene happened in the sea outside the island. The boundless blood-red color slowly surged towards the island, as if the island was swallowing the blood in the sea. The extremely wide sea of blood began to shrink. All the green plants on the island also began to grow wildly. Until the blood disappeared, a faint voice came from the peak of the island. It's still not enough. However, before controlling the roar of these monsters, I'm afraid it can attract many monks who want to seek treasure. If it doesn't succeed this time, I don't know how many years I have to wait. As the voice fell, a golden light in the distance flew towards this place rapidly. It was Zuyun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzhuan Xianxia. Chapter 219. Zuyun did not rush to the island, but stopped cautiously. It's strange, isn't it, said that there are countless sea monsters here, why can't you see one? There was a faint smell of blood in the air, but it was very light. From a high position, the island has a panoramic view, but it is full of life and seems a little out of tune with the surrounding environment. There must be monsters when things go wrong. It is a bit difficult to understand the appearance of an island that looks like a fairyland in the wild sea. Zuyun naturally does not dare to go down. If you don't want to look any further, now I'm just looking for an elixir of immortality, a spiritual fire or something, just let it happen. Zuyun used his flying boat to find an island more than dozens of miles away and landed on it. Estimating the time, it would take at least 1 day for people from Haili sect or Hao city to come over. While you're at it, why not practice some more? After Zuyun fell, after observing that there were no traces of human habitation where he was, he found a cave. After entering, he quickly stepped into the Dewu glazed mirror. At the same time, on that island, there was a voice of suspicion. Obviously he is just a minor cultivator in the foundation building stage, why are he so cautious? And after falling, there will be no more life, could it be that he also has a spiritual pearl? If that's the case, if I can seize the spirit beads and fuse them, I'll have a better chance of getting out of trouble. The place where the breath disappeared is not far from here. Go and take a look. As the sound gradually disappeared, the entire island began to move slowly. And the direction is exactly the uninhabited desert island where Zuyun is located. Maritime city. Empty. All the monks set out towards the sea. Rather than staying here, everyone wants to have a chance at immortality. In addition, the full force of the sect was mobilized, which undoubtedly emboldened the young chi refining monks a lot. That's how people gather together. 35 forces finally elected a new alliance leader while the ship was sailing. Only, this time it was 2 people. Qin Tianzu of Siren Cave and Wei Zhentian of Jingguang sect. Both of them are in the late stage of foundation building and have not yet reached their peak. Thanks to their mutual coordination, there were nearly 1,000 people on dozens of ships. Moreover, they know the precise location of the formation, and are using the spirit stones and the spiritual power of ordinary monks to move forward at full speed regardless of consumption. On the other side, Haili Zone was afraid of the sound of the roar and the possibility of encountering people from Hao City. Under Cibelo's instructions, they changed their direction slightly and planned to go around the formation to avoid them. It's just that both parties don't know. The creature in the formation had already caused the entire island to move, but Zuyun had no idea. At this time, he went to the pasture again to check the condition of the dog's nose. After running around for several hours, more than a few days have passed in the ranch. In comparison, the spiritual power in Dog Nose's body has been completely stable. Looking at it at this time, it looks more like he is asleep. It looks pretty good. Just when Zuyun nodded with a smile, Goza seemed to be quietly awakened by the sound. Boss. Seeing Zuyun's figure, Gaobi suddenly became extremely excited and shouted out. However, the voice he heard himself was. Woof woof. Are you okay? Zuyun's smile froze, and then he was overjoyed. He knelt down and patted his head gently. Why can't I speak? The dog snorted and screamed, but the barking sound of woof, woof, woof was still heard. Don't scream. You are still very weak when you just woke up. Save your strength. As Zuyun spoke, his hands suddenly froze, his eyes showed an incredible expression, and he said in shock, You can't speak anymore. Goza felt aggrieved and nodded helplessly. Zuyun almost yelled. He couldn't speak anymore. How would he communicate in the future? He can understand what he says, but I can't understand him. Whoa. Dog Nose also whimpered helplessly and leaned down. This action seemed to be an instinct engraved in his body. After all, when he was in the Fire Dragon sect, he always looked after the door like this. Seeing this, Zuyun could only accept it helplessly, and couldn't help laughing and scolding, "Forget it, it's good to survive. Just stay here, and wait until I can refine the transformation pill in the future, and then I can turn you into a human." With that said, he stood up and pretended to leave the ranch. Unexpectedly, the dog nose jumped up, opened its mouth and bit Zuyun's skirt. "What, you don't want to?" Zuyun frowned and asked. He really didn't understand the meaning of dog nose. The dog nose nodded first, then stretched out a paw and reluctantly scratched the tip of its black nose. Zuyun pondered for a moment and his eyes lit up. "You mean, you can still use your sense of smell to help me find things?" Seeing that Zuyun understood, Gaobi was overjoyed and nodded repeatedly. But Zuyun shook his head and said, "The formation broke open and an island appeared. I thought it was a bit strange, so I didn't plan to look for the spiritual fire. I just wanted to find a spiritual plant that could refine the longevity pill. Just take the medicine. You should rest here peacefully, there are mountains, water, and scenery." The dog's nose was stunned. They came here for the spiritual fire, but why didn't they look for it? Instead, they looked for some elixir of immortality. Is the elixir of immortality so easy to find? But he couldn't speak at this time. Dog Nose was so anxious that he kept spinning on the ground, not knowing how to express that he also knew several kinds of spiritual medicine. Zuyun thought he was playing with his tail, smiled, and then left directly. Only Dog Nose, who was unwilling to leave, was left dumbfounded. He looked at Xiao Brown beside him, wanting to ask where this was. Who knew that Xiao Brown turned his horse face with contempt and ran away. He looked at Xiao Hui who was drinking water on the other side. Xiao Hui seemed to have sensed something, looked up, and continued to drink water with his head down. Dog Nose suddenly woke up. "I thought I could see Zuyun, and I thought he took me to a safe place on a flying boat. But he suddenly disappeared, which means that this must be an independent world outside the body. Just like Zhao Kamang was taken away by the foundation building cultivator? Not only that. What surprised him most was Xiao Hui. It is obviously just an ordinary horse, how come the look just now reveals a little spirituality? It has only been a short time." He looked down at the vast lake, thought for a moment, and walked over. A strong breath of spiritual power rushed into his nose. "These are spiritual springs." Go Bazai was very surprised. He had been in the Fire Dragon sect for a full 1,000 years. Even though he had not seen much, he had heard a lot. Those who know some beast controlling techniques will have some space magic weapons. That is something more advanced than a storage bag, which can be used to place living creatures. However, it is too incredible that there is even a spiritual spring in it. Go Bazai only understood what Zuyun meant by letting him rest. "There is no danger here anymore, so I will recall how I used to be a dog. When the boss comes again, I will find a way to go out with him and help him find a longevity elixir." After making a decision, Go Bazai began to drink the spiritual spring. He turned back to his original form and could no longer practice the original chi refining method. If he wanted to become stronger, this spiritual spring was the only way at present. Zuyun didn't know what Go Bazai was thinking. In his opinion, Go Bazai was of little use to him now. What he needed now was to prepare more means. For example, the water escape technique in the 5 elements escape technique. Being in the sea, there was water all around. This method might have unexpected effects. Taking out the technique, Zuyun turned to the page of the water escape technique, sat cross-legged, and began to practice seriously. For several days in a row, he had mastered the operation method of the water escape technique to perfection. but he didn't know how to use it. After a moment of silence, Zuyun decided to go out and try it out in a while. But he didn't know that the deserted island where he was had undergone earth-shaking changes. That creature was only 10 miles away from here. At the same time, the people from the Sea City and High Le sect arrived here almost at the same time. There was no place to disembark, so they all boarded the deserted island. In addition, countless sea cultivators also came here one after another. However, they all kept a certain distance from the two groups of people, one more and one less. Because a naked man, with his eyes wide open, shouted angrily at Shibola. Shiva, you killed 3 people from my Julie section just before landing on the island. I, Ye Liao, want to settle this account with you. Behind him, countless strong cultivators stood up one after another, forming a great contrast with the delicate female cultivators of High Le sect in front of them. However, the two sides were on the verge of a fight, and the rest of the people watched coldly. Because the Fairyland Island no longer had a large formation to protect it, they no longer needed to gather all their strength, but they could break the formation to land on the island. If there were fewer people at this time, then after landing on the island, there would be fewer people competing for the treasures of heaven and earth, and their gains would be correspondingly more. Ye Liao's blood rushed to his head, but Shibola understood the reason. She just laughed and said, Master Ye, if there is any account, let's talk about it after we go treasure hunting. If it is really my sisters who killed your disciples, as long as you are not afraid of being laughed at, you can pay as much as you should, and I, Shibola, will never say no. At this time, she just wanted to keep things quiet, but Ye Liao was not so easy to deal with. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 220. Ye Liao, if you want to fight, I, Shivalo, will not be afraid of you. Seeing Ye Liao giving up, Shibala's beautiful eyes also condensed. Compared to Ye Liao, who was easily impulsive, she was still a little calmer. When she saw the other people in the 34 caves gloating about their misfortune, she couldn't help but become tougher. If he was just a Julie sect and heard him say that he had been dead for 3 foundation building periods, he would naturally not be afraid. Court death. Ye Liao was furious, and a giant fist came from the air. Suddenly, spiritual power surged, invisible air waves appeared in the air, and it hit Shivalu. I think it's you who is looking for death. A male voice rang out, and a middle-grade spiritual sword with a simple shape suddenly jumped out from behind Shivalu and rushed towards the air wave. Sword cultivator. Ye Liao's expression changed. When the air wave exploded, he suddenly withdrew his posture to protect himself, with a cold expression on his face. The reason why he attacked on the spot was to bully the Highly sect, who were all female cultivators, and whose natal magic weapons were all musical instruments, and who relied on their music to hurt people. I don't understand music and I'm tone deaf, how can he hurt me? But now, a sword cultivator suddenly appeared. I'm going to attack the master of poetry without asking any questions. First, I'll ask you if I'm willing to accept the sword in my hand. The male cultivator slowly came forward from behind Sibylla. Later stage of foundation building. Everyone present was breathing heavily. Except for Li Dachan, they are all sea monks. How come they don't understand Highly sect? In the past, they had recruited some monks who were addicted to women and became guests of the sect to serve the Highly sect. But most of them are monks in the late stage of chi refining or early stage of foundation building. After Shibala came ashore, what method did she use? Even the sword cultivator in the later stage of foundation building could be used by her. Kakik. Seeing the expressions of Ye Liao and everyone else, Shivalo laughed out loud and said, let me introduce to you, this is the protector elder of my Highly sect. On the desert island, there was silence. It's not that they don't dare, but they are unwilling to stand up for Ye Liao. It's no good, Who would do such a stupid thing? Ye Liao also calmed down at this time. Shiva, I'll settle the score with you then. Being able to become the leader of a sect is naturally not easy for Ye Liao. After regaining his senses, he quickly retreated into the crowd. Sibylla didn't want to get too entangled with him. She and Li Dachun just wanted to use the secret place to explore treasures. As long as they found something, they would go straight to Chuzhu. Zuyun killed the people in Wanjianshan, but they didn't dare to stay in Yunzhou anymore. But they didn't know that Zuyun not only dealt with the coming Jian Tianming, but also joined forces to suppress Tang Zhuyang under the confused sword cliff. Look, the island seems to be moving. At this time, someone suddenly exclaimed, and everyone turned their heads to look. Sure enough, when they landed on the island was much closer, and everyone couldn't help but show excitement. They are all monks, so they can naturally feel the change in distance. And such an abnormality shows that this island is the secret place they are looking for. Walk. Immediately, a monk from the demon control sect summoned his own sea monster, rode up, and rushed towards the island. After someone took the lead, other people were naturally not willing to lag behind. They all used their own magic weapons or boats to follow closely behind. Xiaoxi, what about us? Li Dachun asked in a deep voice. He vaguely felt that this island seemed somewhat ominous. Take a look and then talk. Sibylla could still keep her composure, but when she saw people from Hiu City leaving one after another, and there were fewer and fewer people on the deserted island, even the casual cultivators followed her, she couldn't hold it any longer. There are many dangerous places in the sea. Let's wait until someone lands on the island before setting off. Although the island looked close, it was actually more than 10 miles away. When Sibylla said this, the fastest person had only traveled half the distance. Good. Li Dachun nodded, and then passed on the order, telling everyone to try not to separate, otherwise they would be isolated and unable to help when in danger. Zuyun, who was in the mirror, still didn't know that the island was close, or even that all of this happened because of him. At this time, he was still practicing the water escape technique. Sibylla didn't come out of the mirror until he saw someone landing on the island and setting off. Only then did he realize that he almost collided with someone, but luckily he hid in a cave at that time. Everything that should come has come. Since someone is taking the lead, that's the best thing. Looking at the countless figures in the sky and on the sea, Zuyun murmured and jumped into the sea. Then, he quickly recited the water escape formula, and immediately felt that his body seemed to undergo a mysterious change. I don't know if I completely melted into the water or if I turned into water. With the thought, Zuyun appeared a mile away. Is this speed so fast? The first time he tried this water escape technique, he gave himself such a surprise, and Zuyun was overjoyed. But he was not overly excited, because the movement just now consumed some spiritual energy, which was almost the same as flying with a royal weapon. Now he just wants to sneak to the island quietly. Since he has used his spiritual power, there is a possibility that he will be discovered. However, there is such a method in the water escape art, it is just that the speed is slower. After carefully emerging from the sea, Zuyun saw that no one was paying attention to him behind him. He breathed a sigh of relief and then completely sank into the sea water. For safety reasons, he even dived extremely deep. Then he swam towards the island. After swimming for only about an incense stick of time, he suddenly felt something was wrong. The sea area is vast, not to mention the number of monsters, ordinary birds, insects, and fish should be countless. But after swimming for a while, he has not seen even a single living creature. Thinking of the inexplicably missing group of sea monsters here, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. Could it be that this formation is not a treasure-hunting holy land, but a terrifying existence that devours flesh and blood? Thinking of this, Zuyun quickly stopped moving forward, but sank to the bottom of the sea. Another incense stick of time passed, and it was pitch black all around, but he was even more frightened. This place is far away from the sea surface, and he is not afraid that his spiritual consciousness will be discovered by those cultivators. But the information that spread out and brought him was dead silence. It was like a dead place. What is going on? Zuyun was horrified. The group of monsters was gone, which could explain that they were dispersed by those sea cultivators. The ordinary sea fish were gone, which could explain why they were scared away by the roar of the monster a day ago. But he was at the bottom of the sea at this time, but there were not even some ordinary sandworms. This was a bit too creepy. Thinking of this, Zuyun did not hesitate and quickly floated back to the surface of the sea. Looking from a distance, all the cultivators had landed on the island. Whether it was the people of the sea city or those casual cultivators. He was surprised again. Did he guess wrong? While he was hesitating, suddenly a strong suction came from the island. Zuyun had no time to react and was forcibly sucked away. He was horrified and hurriedly wanted to use the water escape technique to escape, but found that he had been sucked into the air. There was no water here, how to escape? He only felt the endless sound of wind in his ears, as if he had become a flying sword being controlled. The speed was so fast that he could not think about how to get away, and the whole person had already fallen heavily on the island. But the people on the island did not seem to notice such a movement. Seeing a cultivator in the middle stage of foundation building falling from the sky, he couldn't help but secretly despise him. At this level, he can't even fly steadily, and he still has the nerve to come here to search for treasure? Shibola and Li Dachan heard the noise, but they didn't take a second look. They still need to observe the environment when they first arrived on the island. Whether it is the people of the sea city or the casual cultivators in the sea, they may be enemies. Killing people for treasures is common. Zuyun sat up from the grass with lingering fear, and with the cover of these waist-high weeds, he began to check his own situation. After finding that there was nothing wrong, he breathed a sigh of relief first, and then cheered up. This island can suck him in without resistance. I'm afraid it's not that simple. He doesn't want any spiritual fire or spiritual medicine. He just wants to leave quickly. But at this moment, the island suddenly shook. The surprised voices of those cultivators were also heard from all directions. Some timid monks tried to fly quickly in the air, but found that they would lose control and fall down after only a few feet from the ground. Zuyun thought it was not good, and heard someone screaming, "Not good, this island is going to trap us here." Hearing this, he quickly sat up from the grass, and saw a red shield rising from the edge of the island, at a very fast speed, and it was completely closed in just a few breaths. At the same time, a playful and ethereal voice came from the peak in the center of the island. "Welcome to my world.